is so unique that you would not find it anywhere else. And that is why we want them to come and attend. And once you get on to sign in, once you get on to the OTP on the WebEx, I think it is, if you're a professional, true professional, then it would be very difficult for you to log out and leave the presentation midway. The names, we have you today, Dr. Jugal Kishore. Then we have Dr. Sunil Pandey, who's a director in TERI. He will be talking about hazardous waste safety management. And last but not the least, we'll have Dr. Ashish Mittal, who's the CEO of Occupational Health and Safety Management Consultancy Service. He would be speaking on occupational health regulations. We've got 45 minutes each for all the presentations, sir. And at the end of the third presentation, we'll be taking a few questions. In fact, I encourage all the participants to please mention their questions in the question and answer window. So whenever the speakers are free from their presentation and before and after, they could answer those questions in the window itself. And but then we will definitely acknowledge those questions in the question answer sessions also. But because the number of questions are so many that it is difficult, practically impossible to take all of them. So I would request the speakers also to keep an eye on the question and answers, the questions which are put forward by the participants. And if you can at all answer those, it will be really thankful for that. So on that note, without taking much of the time, I think I would request my colleague Sanjeev Kumar, who's part of the disaster risk management team at FICCI, a young dynamic guy, to take up from here and to formally introduce Dr. Jugal Kishore, who would be talking on medical preparedness for a safer industry. Over to you, Sanjeev. Please kindly go ahead.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you so much, Rubab. It's really nice that you spoke so much of me. Formally, I would like to welcome Dr. Jugal Kishore. Sir, good afternoon, sir, and welcome to the session, sir. But before we request Dr. Jugal to take over, I wish to take this opportunity to give a brief introduction of Dr. Jugal Kishore. Dr. Jugal Kishore is a medical and public health expert. He did his secondary school education from Jamia Millia and has more than 260 research papers are published in journals, in magazines and dailies. He has authored more than 32 books and many chapters and pamphlets on public health, national programs, social reform, and rationality. He is a member of many expert groups of health planning and implementation of programs of the central and state government. As a member of many task forces of ICMR and Ministry of Health and Family Welfare, recruitment boards, and has conducted more than 50 national and international training programs, workshops, symposiums. Dr. Jugal Kishore is currently the Director Professor and Head of Department, Community Medicine, Vardhaman Mahavir Medical College and Safdarjung Hospital, New Delhi. So welcome Dr. Jugal Kishore, sir, and we request you to kindly take over from here for your presentation. Sir, you are on mute, sir.
Pardon me. Okay, fine. Yeah. Okay, thank you very much. And good afternoon, everybody. And this is the good initiative by the FICCI and joining hand with the NIDM and taking few topics which are important for the safety of workers and also all the environment over there, including industry. And some of the topics are very good. And many times we know many things, but we are not doing it because we are not tuned to doing those all things. Health is very, very important. You must be knowing that no person was doing any work when we had the COVID. And this everything was closed down, and we have very severe impact on the industries. You can imagine if we don't have good health, no industry will work. So the health should be given priority, not only at the time when they are working, which is the most important part, because majority of the time, their working time, that is 9 to 4, where the person is active, he is in the industry or maybe in the workplace. Other time at home is usually that time also the person suffered from various exposures, and that is comes under the other sector, that is the environmental health or public health. So I am, as a public health expert, know that how to manage these all things in different working conditions and environments. I'll brief that how this disaster at the workplace or maybe in the industry is going to have 6 T's effect, that includes death, disability, disease, distress, damage to health services, and damage to environment. So you can imagine that, almost everything is related to health. That is why all disasters and related to the, bigger events, they are affecting health. Now, we all know that we have man-made disasters and then natural disasters. And natural disasters are, you have many, you know them, but our focus today would be more on man-made, extents and spills and the problems which are actually can be controlled. Therefore, you can imagine that we can't do much in the natural disaster, but in the man-made disaster, everything is under control. So therefore, we have a lot of scope to improve, in which you can see that if the explosion occurred, there is always a reason why the explosion is there, whether it is a chemical or nuclear or maybe radiation or mine explosion. And if we have pollution either inside or outside, all again because of our activities. And if we have the environmental issues like now we have the acid rain, or maybe you can say the climatic change, which is affecting indirectly to industries also, particularly various industries like the agriculture also. And so that is what requires some kind of actions. That is again in control of the human being. Now the chemical, any kind of chemical events have the impact on the health. That might have the general problems or general symptoms, or maybe a specific to a particular organ. So whenever something happened, then the person to be examined, or all the people who are exposed to be examined in a thorough manner, and that you will find that whether it is respiratory or GI or eye or other organs, or sometime death occurs. So death may be because of, again, major system failure or system problem is there. But there are some areas where specific focus is required, whether it is eyes or maybe skin or maybe I think your respiratory system. So all depend on the type of the chemical explosion is there, or maybe radiation is there, or maybe I think it depends on the type of industry. So you have to focus more on area where the need is required. Now, for example, the Bhopal tragedy, which is killed many, but it has the repercussion on various system of the body and life. So one has to examine in totality. So the which is the example. We were not knowing much about this methyl isocyanide, but later on we find many things. The people died, and then we have the every month the detail. Then we have examples of leading to tuberculosis, which may not be related to that this gas, but it aggravate. If you have the bacillus or maybe the virus in the surrounding area, so you become more vulnerable. And that is true for our pollution. In today's problem of the COVID is increased because of the environmental pollution. Similarly, you have more chance of infectious disease, or maybe you have the blindness, or sometimes you have the mental disorders and menstrual irregularities, and then on the your progeny, and that leads to spontaneous abortion and stillbirth. So just one gas has the multiple effect. So what is the workplace emergency? So it's a situation where the workers, customers, or public are threatened or at risk, and it is abrupt or sudden, or maybe you have to shut down the operation. and it required the assessment of the physical and environmental damage, whatever happened due to that emergency. Now, if we look at all the type of industries, so we just find that the number of fatality where the injury or the deaths occur, if we calculate in terms of per lakh workers, then we find that it is the agriculture, forestry, and mining and forestry and hunting and agriculture, and then transport. These are the one which are giving rise to a lot of fatality. But if you see in number, then you will find that all types of industry has some or other type of injuries and fatality. Even our financial activities or information industry or utility industry, you will find some. So all workplace are at risk or maybe having some kind of emergencies at the workplace. So it can strike anywhere at any time and leading to injuries and illness and maybe death. Employer and employee, or so workers and employer has to understand the all working environment and then able to assess it and then able to provide the help. Otherwise, you have the problem. So at the time of the injury and before the injury, can we plan something? So today, my topic would be that how we can make it better planning so we can reduce the occurrence of such kind of emergency at the workplace. So the thing is that you should able to anticipate something that it is going to happen, and what is the probability in different industry. I have already shown you this, so you know that where the fatality is more, and accordingly you can plan. So in some places you require robust and immediate planning. In others you can make a little relaxed kind of planning. But anyway, you require the emergency action plan, and which should guide everybody at the workplace. What immediate action is necessary, and so you have to make a plan. So what kind of plan is required, we'll talk more about it, and in what manner it has to be. First is that WHO has said that this is a need, and at all aspect of the workers' health should be included when you are making some kind of action plan, in which the primary prevention of the occupational hazard. So if the one has to find out what are the hazards are there in the workplace, I think some other speaker will focus on, or maybe some might have talked about it. So first priority is that can we prevent them to be the hazardous. So if we identify the hazard, definitely you can prevent them. Next is that you have to make the protection and promotion of health at workplace. So you have to make extra efforts to protect the workers. Next is that you have to improve the employment conditions, and if something happened, then better response of the health system to the workers health effect, or maybe the injury occur at the time. So if you make the better response system, then so majority of the plan should be on the prevention and then on the response. Now this emergency preparedness and response in occupational health, the purpose of this, which is advocated by the International Commission on Occupational Health, say that to raise the awareness of the emergency risk of the workers which is there. So in many industry, we have the high risk, so they should know their risk. Next is to train the managers and employee and medical staff into those type of risk. And if something happened, then how you are going to manage it. So the training is required of all the category of workers involved in it, and to mitigate their impact. If something happened, then how fast you can, manage these all things, which can definitely decrease the chance of death or disability. Then it is the, purpose of this, plan that every worker should have the access. That is the principle behind. So what is there that in occupational health, it is the principle that every person should have the access to her first aid, at least, or say the workplace should be safe so he can work safely. So these are the principles which are broadly can be called as the access to a first aid is his, it is his right. So the occupational health should be considered as a right of the, the workers. Then only you can provide something to them. Otherwise, they are always neglected. Then the occupational health and safety should include the prevention of physical and mental disease and injuries, including the, through which what we can do the first aid. And you can also provide first aid to injuries and also to mental health. Then it is requiring multidisciplinary, approach where the occupational health and safety should be part of it. And we require, responders, emergency responders and volunteers. So all has to work together to make the things. So these are all principles that by which we can make our, the plan in much better way. So this emergency plan and procedure is actually, just see that whatever you are doing is fulfilling the local legislations. If it is a family, this Factory Act or some other acts are there. There are so many acts. I think Dr. Ashish is going to talk about various kind of acts. So one has to fulfill the need of that act. That's a very important part. Next is that we have, some cultural organizational policies. Each industry has their own policy. So that policy should be, tuned to the emergency plan. The policy should also include that emergency plan and should also fulfill each other. Then, your plan should also fulfill the need of economic background of the factory. It should not be, advocating something which is not possible by the factory. So that's what the economic background should be considered when you are making it. Then how many number of employees are there or contractors are there and your workers and all these people are there. That also make the how much emergency plan is required. And third is the last one is the local emergency medical services system. What kind of local emergency system is required for this. So this plan, emergency plan, should be made according to, these all 5 factors. Next is, what would be there in the plan when we talk about the medical supply and equipments. Like, in that first aid kits is there. So what would be there in first aid kits? I'll discuss a little more about it. But automatic external defibrillator may not require every place, but it's there. Then, the people who can operate, should be also be there. Or in emergency, supply, if it is there, then person who can operate should also be there. Then drugs for emergency care. What are the drugs which are required at the time of emergency when it is a respiratory or maybe cardiac or maybe skin or maybe eyes, and the respirator. If, some gases are there in the industry which may affect, so that we require some respirator. Portable medical equipment are, handy. They are always good. They should also be available. Then tele-medical equipments in which, you can use the recent technology which can transmit the data to distant places and we can get, information and also able to, manage the things locally. Then appropriate personal protective equipments like gloves and maybe face mask, or you have the goggles. All these things are also required. Ambulance, the patient has to be transferred from industry to the health center. Then definitely a type of ambulance which is required is also depend on the type of the emergency which we are going to face in the industry. In infrastructure, the field clinics can be there, or maybe I think first aid station can be there in the each stations or each working sites or must points. These are the equipments which can be placed at the stations, and these are you can see that 5 major points which are to be there in the first aid. One is the injury or trauma management, the minor injuries and eye care, employee comforts and burn care. So for that, there is a list on right side which are having various items are given. So we can place this kind of uh, like adhesive band-aids, adhesive tape, antibiotic treatment applications, or antiseptic, or breathing barriers, burning dressings. So how many should be there in the kit? It is also written. So we have a list, and the number is also given. So in minimum, this is the minimum requirement by the one of the standard given by American society. So accordingly, we can fill these all things in our first aid kit. And in India, beside the bigger industries like the GAIL and other Indian Oil, we have the biggest, service industry, which is railway, and they have a very good system of, providing this first aid, emergency care, and medical facility in railway staff and also the passengers. Beside that, there are other kits, not only just first aid kit, but maybe some other kits are required depending on the type of exposure the people are going to have, the employer is going to have. If suppose there could be the water poisoning, so we require the water poisoning detection kit. Or if there is a nerve agents are there which can be damaging our nerves, so we can have the nerve agents. Or similarly, we can have some other paper, detectors. Kits are there of different chemicals, and residual vapors can be detected. So these kits depend on the type of industry we are working in. So then we can find out what kind of exposure are there. This is also a decontamination vehicle. Sometimes require if possibility of some exposure is there. If it is a radiation, so we require such kind of vehicles to decontaminate the people who may expose from radiation and other things. Similarly, like portable gas chromatography may be sometimes useful to find out what kind of personal contamination occur, or the other environment contamination occurs. Then, so these are all equipments available. It depends on the type of industry and type of problem can be there. Now, the human resource which is required by the minimum standard is that minimum number of first aiders, who can provide the first aid. It can be like every, industrial worker can be made as a first aider, because they can help other person whenever the need is arise. So training of all, employees possible. And everybody can, so first aid can be provided to everybody. That is why this has been, by the NIDM, they want to do it according to law also. Even the schools and colleges, we want the student should learn. Everybody become the first aider, so we can decrease the chance of the injuries causing the disability and death. Similarly, paramedics, nurse, doctors, and as well as distribution of work shift. If 24-hour person is required, so we require many, not only just one. So depend on the type of the clinic you want to establish, or first aid station you want to set up. So accordingly you make the plan. Then at the organizational plan, in the same emergency plan, we have the organization plan in which the alarm plans, like if alarm occur, who is going to do it, and where who is going to respond to it. Then plan of installations, where it will be placed, and the way the communication will be distributed, and who is going to respond to which kind of communication. This all has to be written in the plan. And then who is going to maintain the medical equipments, replacement of medical goods, and regularly checking of this, and development of this emergency medical guidelines, and then fact sheets of the chemical employed. So these all has to be kept. Then it becomes organizational plan as a part of the emergency plan. Then cooperation is required. We require external, internal rescue team having the licensing with each other. Even sometimes the government department and the private has to work together, because this is not just if some private factory is there, so it is not the job of the government. No, everybody has to work together to diffuse such kind of extent if it occurs. Then provision of mass casualty and disaster care if required. So such plan should also be part of the disaster plan which we are going to have. Next is the preparedness and training. So we have the plan, and after that we have to make sure that in the plan it is written how to make preparedness and training, in which you have to see that the people are getting training and they are prepared. So for prepared for what? Immunization, training, a the time, you are merging all the risk. It may be confusion. So we require each risk specific training, and then particular PPE and different type of PPE is available. So what need to be done, how used to be, how these PPE can be used and disposed of, donning and doffing, these all processes are there. Then access to specific health promotion program, if factory or maybe industry or the government is having some kind of promotional activity, so awareness program, or maybe I think immunization program, or maybe nutrition program or insurance program, these all things can be disseminated and should be known to everybody. Training plan to build and maintain skills and competencies like the first aid courses are there already. St. John is providing such kind of training. Similarly, various organizations are there. We also have such kind of training facility as the association. Then training of the medical staff. The medical staff are not trained in everything. They have to be trained, and mock drill should be done so they are refreshed with their new knowledge and training. Then drills are required. That is what medical, emergency drills are required. Cooperation with the medical internal and external rescue team, which I have already said. So training of each one, and then seeing that it is working or not, and then mock drills keep occurring. Then auditing is done. Like, you require internal audit and external audit. Like all equipment are working, all plan is in place, mock drill is done properly or not. So that kind of audit is required, making sure that things are at, they can be disposed of anytime. Then communication lines, internal, external, has to see, ensure, and then, have the direct contact, indirect contacts, all are establishing the relationship through the communication lines, and then seeing that they are getting refresher course, regularly. Sometimes you have to make it compulsory, but maybe, seeing that learning is all the time, necessary. So it's a lifelong learning, not just one time. After this, the next point is that, how you will prevent emergency and follow-up. So prevention start with the identification of risk. So once you identify, like, you have to assess that whether how much risk is there. So risk could be physical, chemical, ergonomics, or work organization, or maybe environment in which you are working. It could be related to climate. So these all risk has to be assessed and then notified. You have to make the list and then notify that these are the risks are there. Then time to emergency medical services to reach the rescue. That's also you require that if you don't have the system of approaching or taking away. So if you don't have very good transport, or maybe I think, then you may lose the time and you may not be effective. And time to reach medical facility, that has to be done by road, sea, or air. It should be clearly demarcated. Then it become easy. Otherwise, on one particular point of time, it may become difficult for you. Next is the surveillance system. So if you keep the that whole industry or the workstation on a surveillance, then you can identify that something is going wrong. Like we can monitor the level of some carbon dioxide or level of some chemicals in the environment. So you keep checking, and then whenever it is high, then you are you are pointing out that maybe I think this is the time where we take the action. So this triggering point has to be assess through our surveillance system. So if you have a surveillance system, it is always good, whether it is a disease surveillance or maybe I think chemical surveillance or any other type of surveillance. Then psychosocial care. No, you require a system, or maybe I think where they can look after the psychosocial, which is very, very crucial. If something happened to employee, so what is going to happen to their family and children? And do you have some method to give the counseling? And so require trained counselors or trained psychological resource care. So that is what a part of prevention of emergency and follow-up. The special follow-up is required. Suppose some disability occur or some kind of mental disorder occur, or maybe some kind of other issues occur, then the special follow-up is also required, whether it is a daily or maybe weekly or monthly. And then you have to have the tools of reporting, and that should be recorded, and some kind of discussion should occur. So follow-up that lessons, what lessons you have learn from those all things. Then reinforcement, preparedness with training and first aid implementation. This is again and again that whoever the worker is at the first aid, or whoever is responsible for workers' safety, health and safety, they should be always prepared and having the training and first aid, training and mock drills. These all should go again and again. So you are ensuring that yes, everything is at the your disposal. So you can imagine that we can have such kind of cycle in which the preparedness and training, prevention, follow-up, and response and procedures. In preparedness, we have the first aid training, drilling, simulations, training of medical staff. Then in case of prevention, you have the system of all, like prevention is identification, risk identification, hazard identification, all these things can be part of it. Then surveillance is like, surveillance is a follow-up or evaluation, auditing, adaptation, all these are part of the follow-up. And then, response is like initial response care, the emergency care, these all things, or maybe how to handle the environmental change, capacity, regulations, all has to be conformed or not. So in nutshell, you can see that, this is a cycle, keep, rotating. So you are at the very, very advanced stage of your response. Beside this whole thing, actually it is the responsibility of employer only. But beside that, the responsibility of the employer is the maximum, because the workers are working for him, and he has to ensure that the the worker, when they suffered something, then it is the duty of the employer ensuring that initial care is done, minimum response is also provided, emergency care is provided. This is the responsibility of the employer. Beside that, ensuring that whether you have provided the basic life support response is available with you, so you are providing it, or advanced life support. Depends on the type of the industry. So the responsibility of employer depends on that. So if such kind of problem which can require advanced support, then you should have the advanced life support system. Then he has to make first aid supply, then adequate first aid supply, and then checking of the employer, checked by the employer, the content of the first aid is there. So whether he can appoint somebody to see that auditing and surveillance and all these things, or he himself can do it. And then ensuring that prompt transportation system is there, telephone lines are there, and interaction with other, and availability of the PPE and different kinds of PPE in sufficient amount is available. It should not be that very few are there, and in the need it's not available to the rescue team. Then identification of hazard, and then ensuring that hazard is less, or maybe you are decreasing the risk through various methods. And if your industry says that the risk is always there, then you are keep communicating, what need to be done, and ensuring the alarm system and making the people are using the PPE when they are working. So the minimum risk is there on the body or maybe on the mind, both. Then responsibilities that where the workplace should be, evaluated. Who is going to be evaluated? So it is not that we can have internal, external evaluation or say like audit. So that should be done both. And external evaluation should always be extra party, like should not be the party of that employer group. So you have the fair idea that what you are doing is really good or not. Then evaluation should be done by the certified body. It's always good because they are more fair as compared to others. And then date of hazard assessment are also important. So you are ensuring that you are checking those all hazards and they are not increasing in number or maybe severity. And then in training, you have to ensure that PPE necessary and what necessary, when necessary, and then all the, how you have to use it, how you have to dispose of, and then caring of self and life and all these things. Then next is the health professionals are there, like the occupational health and safety professionals are there. And they should be also trained properly in all the things. And the proper health and safety professionals should be recruited. They should not be just, without degree or maybe without any formal training. So if you are recruiting such kind of thing, they are not able to identify some of the basic things like the physical, biological, psychological risk. You are not able to give any kind of help to what whenever it is required, identifying and making the plan and also implementing that plan, and also reading all those policy and then all laws, and then seeing that they are important for the running of the industry. And then we have the role of the factory medical officer in emergency, in which he has to make the immediate contact to the controller and instant controllers. And then he has to ensure that treatment at the first aid center should able to provide first aid center, running the first aid center and treatment of the people who are there. And then whenever it is higher in out of his capacity, then immediately seeking the help of others and mobilizing the first aid wherever possible and training the other people who are who can provide the first aid. So it is the factory medical officer who has a lot of responsibility as far as the first aid is concerned. The role of head or manager, that is the appraise main incident controller about the injured person. This is his role. Then this is the duty of the industrial medical facility that should be evaluated at least every 5 years. So if it is early than that, I think it is much better, but at least you should have that much period of, and then you should have a system of that in spite of the all emergencies, the business continuity plan should be there. It should not be that your business should halt, or maybe I think you stop the working of the factory, because that is not the job of our whole system of emergency management. It should be continuously working and improving things. So the continuity should be there and working should continue. So thank you very much. If you have any question, I'm ready to take up. Otherwise, I'll be looking at your chat and we'll be able to answer some of the question if they come. Thank you very much. Sanjeev.
Yeah, thank you so much, Dr. Thank you so much for a really insightful session. I'm sure you very rightly emphasized on the need of importance of medical planning and preparedness for industries, especially now that the world is badly hit by COVID. The need of training managers, employees, medical staff to prevent accidents, very rightly and very, I would say it's the best way to prevent accidents and minimize their impacts. Really, it was really a wonderful session, sir. And you also very well elaborated the first aid requirements. I'm sure most of us would be knowing the first aid thing. but the way you elaborated what exactly is required, perfectly wonderful, sir. So I would, at this time, I would encourage all the participants also, if they have any questions, please put it in the question and answer box to be addressed by Dr. Jawal Kishore, sir, maybe at the end of the sessions today. So again, thank you so much, Dr. Jugal Kishore, sir, for a wonderful session and very, very insightful session as always. We are getting really a very good feedback for your sessions always, sir. Thank you so much. Yeah, and moving further, sir, I will take this opportunity to welcome Dr. Sunil Pandey, sir. Dr. Sunil Pandey, sir's session is the next. He is the director, Terry. He'll be giving his presentation on hazardous waste management. Before we move forward to and hand over to Dr. Sunil Pandey, sir, I would just like to give a brief introduction of Dr. Sunil Pandey, sir. Dr. Sunil Pandey is a Senior Fellow and Director, Environment and Waste Management Division, TERI. In addition, he is also working as adjunct faculty and head for Center for Regulatory and Policy Research of TERI University. He has more than 30 years of consultancy research experience in the areas of municipal, industrial, and hospital waste management, waste to energy issues, impact assessment, air, water, and soil quality monitoring, site assessment, performance evaluation of ETP, and institutional strengthening and capacity building. He has obtained his PhD degree in hazardous waste characterization from Nagpur University, and while working as project fellow at NIRI, Nagpur. Prior to joining TERI, Dr. Sunil has worked for ERM India and at the Hong Kong University of Science and Technology on development of landfill liners for containment of land disposed hazardous waste and deriving material balance and associated environmental pollution for Hong Kong region as part of postdoctoral research. So I would again welcome Dr. Sunil Pandey, sir. Would request you to kindly give your lecture, sir. Welcome, Dr. Sunil Pandey.
Yep. Thank you, Sanjeev, and very good afternoon to all of you. And thank you also to Professor Jugal Kishore for setting the tone and context, because some of my material, of course, would be as a would also refer to what he has presented. And what I'll do is let me share my presentation. Can you see my presentation?
Yes, we can see. Please go ahead, sir.
Okay, let me put it on full screen. Yeah.
Yeah.
So what I'll do is in this previous few presentations, I was actually talking about hazardous waste, general hazardous waste issues. And so this time on, I thought let me pick up a specific hazardous waste, which also is an issue of national concern, and discuss more about that specific hazardous waste. And plus, I mean, in case the participants would be interested later on overall hazardous waste issues, we can come back to that in Q&A session. And so what the specific issue which I have taken in this presentation is about spent solvent management. And we know a lot of industries, I'll give you example in subsequent slides. A lot of industrial operations use solvent and different kind of solvents. And a lot of those are recycled into the authorized units. But at times, because these solvents, they themselves, in terms of characteristics, are dangerous to handle, not only in the industry where they're using it, but subsequently when they become waste, it's also equally hazardous for the industry who's recycling it. So this has to be done with a lot of care, and a lot of safety issues need to be considered when we look at spent solvent management. So moving to first slide, the common industrial applications where different kind of solvents are used. To begin with, industrial cleaning and degreasing, a lot of metal finishing operations which we do in industry before we put metal sheets or metal parts to any use. For example, metal sheets are extensively used in automobile industry. And when these metal sheets are sourced from another industry, generally while transporting these sheets, you put a grease on that so that it doesn't corrode while transporting it. So when it comes to industry, you have to degrease it, clean it before you apply paint, otherwise paint would not stick. So this degreasing is done with solvents. Earlier, a lot of very toxic solvents were being used. Now, a lot of industries are using solvents which are much less toxic and much less hazardous. Then other process which use solvent very extensively are, say, for example, pharmaceutical industry, where different formulations, different dilutions are made, and they use solvents also very extensively. Pesticides, for the same reason, where different dilutions, different formulations are being made for pesticides. There, the solvents also are used in process. Dry cleaning in industry, as you know, dry cleaning industries doesn't use water, and they have to depend on non-water-based solvents for removing dirt and cleaning, and also protecting your woolen clothes so that they don't shrink. They use solvents. Paints, as I said, paints and coatings, whether it's varnish or normal paint, the concentrate has to be thinned, and also for the ease of application. And the role of solvent here is when the paint is spread on the surface, smooth spreading of paint, a thin layer, is facilitated by using solvent. And this solvent over the period evaporates because of its property, leaving the paint coated on the surface. So here also solvents are used. Then in the textile process, textile manufacturing process, there's a process called fabric scouring. Here also solvents are used at times for different specific purposes. If a fabric has to be coated by, say, coated and provided, say, water repellent properties, here also solvents is used. Similarly, as I said, auto, airplane manufacturing and maintenance activity, even in industrial maintenance activity, a lot of solvents are used for cleaning. So this was broadly the different industrial applications. There's not exhaustive, but key industrial applications where solvents are used. Now, these solvents can be water-based, these solvents can be organic, these solvents can be halogenated, they might contain halogen, which has its own problem, and they might be non-halogenated, like benzene, toluene, etc. And the solvents will have different kind of water solubility. And also another property which is worth mentioning is they also will have a different kind of volatility. Some might be very volatile, some might be semi-volatile, some might not be so volatile. So depending on their this chemical property, they provide hazard to people who are handling it, and they have to be, based on these properties, have to be dealt in a careful manner. So how do we define spent solvents? If you look at standard definitions, which different government agencies which are regulating solvent use and recycling, say for example, US EPA provides a very interesting definition. Spent means contaminated solvent which is contaminated through use and no longer can be used for original intended purpose without either being regenerated, reclaimed, or otherwise reprocessed. The solvent which has no use in the original production process and has to be either discarded or repurposed or reclaimed or recycled is classified as spent solvent. And as you look at in our local context, when you look at CPCB, they have also clarified that spent oil, which is generated in industry for lubrication and maintenance of machinery, is not spent solvent. That's a spent oil, and that has to be managed separately. And the spent solvent has to be managed separately. It has to be recycled or recovered. Spent solvent is expired, and it can also be expired because a lot of these solvents have shelf life, and beyond those shelf life, they cannot be used with desired properties. So that in that case, they also have to be dealt as a spent solvent. Then in production process, when you're producing solvents, sometimes you, for any chemical product or any product that way, sometimes you generate products which are not adhering to quality of specification products, which cannot be no longer be used. They also have to be discarded or managed as a spent solvent. Unwanted or unused solvent, say for example, you had a process change and suddenly you don't require a particular solvent. And the company which has provided a solvent, you don't have any arrangement with that to take unused solvent back. Then you have to manage that solvent within your premises. So you have to find out either alternate use for that, or treat it and dispose it in a manner which is described by regulatory agencies. Solvents also, while performing their operations, cleaning, degreasing, use in processes, also gather certain contaminants in the process. So residues in the solvent, whether they have potential to contaminate soil or water, or any debris resulting from cleanup of solvent spill, also has to be dealt with as a spent solvent. And spent solvent, for sake of interest, I'll tell you, is a hazardous waste. It's classified as a hazardous waste by Indian regulation, and it's classified as a hazardous waste also by global regulation. And third slide, basically, I would like to discuss why spent solvent recovery and recycling is important, and why we need to do that at all against disposal of spent solvent. Spent solvents, as I said, are generated during use of solvents in industrial process operations. If you are able to reuse them or recycle them or repurpose them or recover them, then they save on virgin resources. Solvents, many of these solvents are costly. For example, in say vegetable oil refining, you use hexane as a solvent, and if you can recover hexane, which is used for oil extraction, then a lot of cost you save there. Similarly, not many solvents are not as cheap and very costly, so recycling makes a business sense. But provided the cost of treatment or recycling is a cost effective, and it's not so happen that you do recycling and recover solvent and it is costlier than your virgin solvent. Then you'll not have any market, and nobody will be able to willing to purchase that. Land disposal of these solvents create problem for the very specific reason because especially if you're looking at non-polar solvents. Non-polar solvents are those which are not soluble in water. For example, benzene, hexane, they're not soluble in water compared to many alcohols which are used, or ethers which are used, or to some extent soluble in water. Why I said land disposal becomes a problem? Because landfill sites which are constructed regulation are actually having clay, which is a kind of enriched soil at the bottom. And what happens is, those who are civil engineers would know that if clay is mixed with water, it swells. It expands and swells, and that is what provides a sealing to the clay, sealing property to the clay. And this property is also used in when you dig boreholes and when you put pipes in and you seal that with, say, for example, using bentonite, which is a type of clay. When this clay is impacted with soil, with these solvents, if the solvents are disposed on the landfill site, then this clay, instead of swelling, shrinks, because these are non-polar solvents. They're water-phobic, not water-loving. So clay, instead of swelling, it shrinks. And when the clay shrinks, the situation creates cracks in the liner. So if there's a lot of solvent, some amount of solvents, of course, landfill can tolerate. But if it exceeds certain amount, then the soil, instead of swelling, shrinks, and then there'll be crack in landfill, and then there'll be problem of leachate going and contaminating the soil and groundwater beneath. However, that is why that's the goal of this presentation. These contaminations need to be addressed, and also associated environmental and occupational issues when you're looking at solvent recovery and recycling. These few slides, actually 4 of them, basically introduces you to handling of these solvents. And solvents, as their property in the graph suggests, in the photo illustration here suggests, they have to be handled very carefully, and because of these properties. They can be irritating. Some of these can be volatile, and if you're not using proper personal protective equipment, they can get into your eyes, and or you can actually inhale them, and they can be very irritating, and also cause long-term sicknesses or short-term, sicknesses. They can be corrosive. A lot of these acids which are used as a solvent, as their pH is very corrosive, they can cause corrosion. They can be toxic. A lot of these are actually proven, say, carcinogenic or teratogenic, or otherwise containing materials which are toxic in nature. And that is why, because of all these properties, these are classified as a hazardous waste once they become waste. They can be carcinogenic, for example, benzene, hexane, they all have proven carcinogenic properties on a long-term exposure. Mutagenic can cause mutagenic effects. Teratogenic can cause birth defects if you are exposed to these solvents for a long time without any personal protective equipment. And these are such some kind of exposure pathways. How person who's handling these solvents, he can get impacted if he's exposed to these solvents. Impact can happen through absorption by skin. It can get into eyes, volatilize, and vapors can get into eyes, and or even the spillage, splashing can go into eyes. Breathing, you can breathe and you can feel uncomfortable. Many times people, not so long ago, there was a styrene leak case in Andhra Pradesh where people actually died. So a lot of people feel sick, but people actually also died. And styrene was used as a raw material, but got volatilized and got released into air. If you swallow them, then obviously you'll have adverse impact, and you have to be very careful on how to handle them. And one can cause injury. If one is not careful handling these solvents, or some of these corrosive ones can also, if they are spread on your skin or body, they can also cause injury if they're not handled properly. So, what is the care one should need? One should need to take while handling solvents, or these are something which is also common to chemicals. Chemicals which have similar properties. If they are toxic, if they are corrosive, if they are reactive, these are a set of do's and don'ts which one needs to, not do's and don'ts, but considerations which one need to consider when one is handling solvents. How long you are exposed to these solvents? Many times in industrial processes, if person is working in high hazard area in the sense if they're using solvents, many times they are used in rotation. Say, for example, 15 days, one set of workers will be working in that area, then they'll be replaced by another fresh set of workers for the next 15 days. So it becomes important, or important issue is how long you are exposed. The solvents which you have been impacted to, can they be washed off with the water? Or if not water, then what is other process of washing them off or rinsing the solvents away? Will the solvents be accumulated in your body if you consume them or inhale them? Because there are many such solvents. Dr. Kishore would probably can tell you more effectively medically. They are accumulated in fat cells or liver in the body, and they are not easily expelled from the body. So if they show long-term accumulation properties. What is the duration of exposure of the solvent? Whether it's a short-term duration, medium-term duration, long-term duration, continuous duration, and this also depends on say volatility of the compound and also toxicity of the compound. The short-term exposure itself is critical enough, or one can tolerate small concentrations long-term exposure. Is the solvent potentially dangerous to human health? If there is a documented record that using certain solvent, it has a potential to cause human health damage? And what is the protective equipment which should be used for handling these solvents? In general, there is an approach in Europe which is suggested for handling the solvents, and this is called TOP approach, TOP, for personal protection. So what it suggests is technical options such as covers for bins with hazardous substances need to be adequately followed. If you are using solvents, if you're using chemicals, they need immediately after the use, they should be immediately covered, and they should not be left open for people to get exposed to. Organizational measures need to be taken, such as reduced exposure to solvent due to different working hours, staggered working hours, as I said, gave example, a crude example of that earlier as well. Use of proper personal protective equipment, that is P of the top, such as using masks, gloves, respirators, or goggles, gumboots, and all that, to prevent people who are engaged in industry using these solvents. Storage of these solvents also is very critical because, not only one should ensure that the solvents which are not compatible with each other. There will be solvents which will be flammable, there will be solvents which will be vaporized easily, there will be solvents which will be corrosive, and then there will be solvents which will react between themselves. So care needs to be taken that they need to be stored in a manner that they are not allowed to interact with each other. They are not mixing. There is no chance of they getting mixed with each other, because what it might do is it might lead to catastrophe if the non-compatible solvents mix. They might explode. They might generate reactive gases, fumes. Even in contact with water, some of these solvents create problems. So, storage should be done as a general rule. The compatible solvent should be stored in one area, and non-compatible solvent should be stored in a manner that they are not stacked next to each other. And and also important issues are, if you look at first bullet, the labeling on the solvent container should be proper. Dangers and threat have to be indicated on container with labeling and proper safety symbols. As far as possible, when the container arrives in the industry, original packaging and labeling should be used, and they should not be removed, so that people who are handling it know exactly what they are handling, and they don't kind of handle something assuming that it's something else. Should be, as the photograph shows, should be stored or stacked in a well-arranged manner. And if you see this room where they are these solvents, different solvents are stored, one thing which you can immediately notice is there's enough space around, not only for people to move, but also solvent crates to be kept, and also adequate ventilation and lighting in the area where these solvents are kept, so that you don't accidentally spill anything. And while handling the solvents, you are very careful. Should be stored in well-arranged manner, as I said earlier. Must not be stored in packages, which can be mistaken for other materials if they are also stored nearby or nearby mostly. Say, for example, food storage or water bottles. If water bottles are to be stored, should not be stored in the same area, and should not be stored next to food or medicines if they are also purchased and stacked in the industry. So these are kind of some do's and don'ts for storing the solvents. Employee safety is paramount importance, because it's ultimately, once our solvents are brought in and are used in the industry, they'll be primarily used by employees, and different kind of safety mechanisms, safety procedures need to be followed. So safety is an important criteria to be taken care when working in industry. What happens is, if you provide industry operator provides a safe working condition and proper storage, proper handling, proper labeling, proper warning, proper training, and proper PPEs for workers to handle these solvents. Then safe workplace also increases not only confidence of workers, but also productivity. They don't end up then wasting materials by mishandling, and also it has been shown to improve productivity of the workers. Use of personal protective gears and following set of rules and standards are the basic steps to be followed. I'll come to those in the later slides. Cleanliness and orderliness of workplace is also important, and it also contributes to safety standards. Many of you must have, I mean, those who have gone to industry must have seen those calendars which are issued by National Safety Council. And they have interesting cartoons and caricatures, and they indicate how, I mean, if you don't follow these cleanliness procedures, if you don't follow proper PPEs, how a small event can lead to large catastrophe. Why employee safety is important for the person who is running industry or in an industry where such hazardous material or toxic materials are being handled. It reduces workplace injuries and illnesses, minimizing risks to employees and others, improve working conditions for the workers, improving thus less accidents, more productivity, improves business performance. Also ensures that you're complying with state legislation or central legislation while handling these materials. And also your workers are confident when they are handling something. If you look at data and statistics, most of the accidents which happen in the industry, 88% of those are due to unsafe action of employees because of various reasons. Either they are not trained to avoid that, or I mean, they are not proper applications. And 10% of that is unsafe mechanical and physical conditions. And only 2% of these accidents and accidents happen because of natural calamities. So what it says is 98%, 88% plus 10% of these accidents can easily be prevented if we follow proper procedures, proper PPEs, proper training, proper handling of these chemicals and solvents. What kind of personal protective equipments? Generally, when we are using these solvents, depending on hazard which they possess, are recommended for industry: hard hats, caps, and hairnets, safety boots, and foot guards, face shields, safety goggles and glasses. Now, in period of Corona, though, we have, I mean, kind of, even the common person has a bit, as a common person, we know some of these safety guards are useful for us as well when we are moving around. If you're working in a noisy area, then you also need a hearing protection for which can be in form of muff or plugs, hearing plugs, protective gloves so that I mean you are not exposed to touching these solvents, protective jackets and vests, which I mean also was shown by Professor Jugal Kishore in his presentation, and kind of respirators if you are handling substance which you might breathe by accident if it gets leaked. And these respirators are of various kinds. They can be respirators which are connected to oxygen. They can be respirators connected to simple air. They can be respirators where these cylinders are built in the suit. They can be respirators where cylinders are outside the suit, or I mean, even simple respirators where you use activated charcoal basically to scrub some of these gases which are not regularly released, but accidentally if they are released, they are scrubbed with activated charcoal. So depending on type of hazard and type of area where you're working, a different kind of respirators are recommended. Now there's something called safety data sheets, which also needs to be compiled by industry which is using some of these solvents. And these safety data sheets are very important documents, which is I mean, in common terms, they are more like material safety data sheets. Only thing is, I mean, these safety data sheets, in a way that they're different from material safety data sheets, is that they're also meant for mixtures. They're not only for a single compound, but they're also meant for certain mixtures where we know that mixture of solvent basically possesses certain hazard. So safety data sheets for employees and training purposes, and also for knowledge purposes, should be provided for all substances and mixtures which meet meeting GHS. GHS is a global harmonizing system criteria. So which is for physical addressing physical health and environmental hazard. And why this global criteria? Because this is to ensure that every country follows the same procedure and same guidelines and same protocols, and there's no variation among the kind of protocols which different countries use. It's also provided for mixtures containing substances meeting a criteria, for example, the properties which we discussed earlier, carcinogenicity, toxicity, for reproduction of specific target organ toxicity, in concentration exceeding cutoff values, and the other substances and mixtures not meeting the criteria for classification as hazardous waste, but they contain hazardous substances in certain concentrations. And this concentration might be low. So as a overall substance may not be qualifying under hazardous waste, but if the local authority or competent regulatory authority requires that the substance has a sufficient hazard, and you should also cover that in safety data sheet, then that also needs to be covered. Now the typical information heads which are to be addressed in producing these safety data sheets should have are basically classified under these 16 heads. And to start with, one should have information of identification of those mixtures or compounds. If they are single compounds, situation is easier. But if company is using mixture, then overall, if they can indicate identification of these compounds. Second is hazard identification. What kind of hazard in terms of properties which I discussed earlier, the substance presence. Composition and information on the ingredients, because it may not be one simple chemical compound. It can be a mixture of compound, or it can be chemical dissolved in a solvent system. Type of first aid measures which are required to be taken in case if there's a accidental exposure or spillage. Firefighting measures, because many times simple type of firefighting equipments, most of the time simple type of firefighting equipments do not work when it's a chemical hazard or chemical fire or a chemical spillage. So what kind of firefighting if the fire is because of chemical catching fire? What kind of firefighting measures you need to take? Spillage accidental release measures, how basically if this happens, you need to contain that in the smallest possible area and smallest possible manner, so that it doesn't spread, and less people are exposed if it at all a spill and accident happens. Handling and storage procedures, as we discussed earlier, what are the good handling and storage procedures? Exposure control and personal protection, what kind of personal protection you require to minimize exposure. Ninth point is physical and chemical properties of the material which you're handling. 10th is stability and reactivity, which is very important also for transporting the material either inside the industry or otherwise when you are procuring them, and also deciding on the packing, how stable your material is and what kind of packing should be provided so that material is stored stable enough in the packing. Toxicological information, point number 11. 12, ecological information, how the material is damaging to environment, not only environment, say different flora and fauna, water or water solubility, and all that. 13th is suggestions on disposal. If this becomes a waste, then how material needs to be disposed, what is a preferred way of disposal, whether incineration is required or the material can be recycled or material can, if it can be recycled, then who can be authorized recyclers? So some of these operations information needs to go. 14th, related to point number 10, stability and reactivity, transport information. Transport information also requires hazard signs to be given, whether material is corrosive or reactive, or there are different hazard classifications. So those need to be clearly mentioned. And also, if one is transporting hazardous chemical or hazardous waste, the driver or the transporter needs to be trained on various emergencies which can arrive and what he needs to do in case of emergency. And as a regulation here in India, hazardous waste regulation says there's something called TREM card, transport emergency card. So every driver transporting hazardous chemical or waste needs to carry a TREM card with him, so that in case of emergency, he knows immediately who to contact and whom to notify. National regulation, brief of national regulation, what are the national regulations which are applying, and references to those regulations and other research which has been done, and any other information under heading 16, which compiler of safety data sheets need to provide. Idea is basically to make people aware, people who are handling such solvents, and also once a solvent is out in transport or use, to make people aware on what kind of hazard this material can present. Now, in the next few subsequent slides, what I've done is I have taken typically, since I said spent soil solvent recycling is the focus of this presentation, what I've done is I've taken a consent condition for a typical state pollution control board, and we'll run you through those conditions. How, I mean, the recyclers which are supposed to recycle these solvents, what are the parameters and what is the care they need to follow while handling these solvents. So consent conditions issued to one of the recyclers basically is that, I mean, this recycler in this case was handling solvents arising from pharma industry. So it very clearly says that you can purchase solvents from specific sector. In this case, pharma industry, you should not take solvents from pesticide industry. And if you are authorized to handle pesticide solvent from pesticide industry, then both of these should be handled separately. Pharma should be distilled separately, and solvents from pesticide industry should be distilled separately. They should never be mixed. Storage of spent solvent as per PESO license, because they have potential to catch fire and also explode. No transfer from drums to distillation column. If you are distilling and recycling these solvents, then direct drum transfer should not be done, and the solvent should be transferred only using solvent transfer pumps, so that there's nothing which is spilling or no leaking happens. Export for the distillation residue, because every time you distill a solvent or recover a solvent or recycle a solvent, you'll be left with tarry material in the end, which cannot be distilled further. And this is what generally contamination or, I mean, tarry residue. What these guidelines suggest that if there is a cement kiln in your area, they should be sent for co-processing in these cement kilns instead of incinerated. And if you are recycling solvent, you should have a provision for online analyzer for continuous monitoring of volatile organic carbons, VOCs, so that you know that these VOCs are below prescribed levels and limits and are not cause of alarm for while you're doing distillation process. Ensure compliance with standard operating procedures which are issued by Central Pollution Control Board. Other conditions which were issued to such recyclers: strict maintenance of zero liquid discharge, because in most of the solvent recycling units, some water is also used for cooling purposes and also scrubber purposes. So this water should not be let out of the industry and should be used, treated and used within the premises. Sending hazardous waste for co-processing, the tar and other residues which are generated from such units to cement industry should be a preference. and conditions which are put forth under Water Act. Effluent should be stored whenever effluent is generated, wastewater is generated. They need to be stored in acid-proof, impervious storage so that they know the containers don't get damaged and don't leak. No bypass line for the treatment plant, and no leakages are permitted. Installation of magnetic flow meters are required to be made, and a safe sampling facility needs to be provided at the inlet and outlet of the wastewater treatment. In case the solid waste which is generated during the recycling, or the waste which is lying at the recycling unit, if there is any leachate generation in that waste, then that leachate also should be handled as per hazardous waste rules and needs to be collected properly and treated, and cannot be drained into municipal drain or industrial drain. Similarly, there has been, other than normal ambient air quality standards and normal water standards, there are also specific conditions issued under Air Act. And these are basically process-related emissions, which are controlled by water. These are for process-related emissions, which are controlled by water scrubber. And this is where wastewater is generated. And they have given limits for different pollutants. SO2 emission of sulfur dioxide, emission of hydrogen chloride, acid gas, chlorine, and HBr. They need to be monitored and constantly kept under this. I'm sorry, I've not given chlorine value here. This is 9 mg per nanometer cube. Additional CPCB requirements for these recyclers: maintaining a passbook. Like for the hazardous waste, CPCB says that you need to maintain a passbook. If you are recycling hazardous waste, how much hazardous waste you are receiving from different industries or different entities. Similarly, how much and what solvents you are receiving for recycling, a similar passbook has to be maintained. Engagement of accredited third party. Professor Jugal Kishore, I believe, also mentioned that third party monitoring should be there. So here also third party monitoring is prescribed for industry who is recycling solvents, if they are doing everything as per SOP. Proper labeling of solvents recovered from pesticide processes, and care should be taken because many times recycled solvent might have residue, even in minutest quantity of pesticide residue. So recycled recovered solvent should not be used for pharma process, or food processing, or even cattle feed. Loading and unloading of spent and recovered solvents has to be done in a manner so that VOCs are not emitted and they are minimized. Storage tanks where solvents are stored, they need to be connected by vents, and vents should lead to condenser. And these condensers, vent of these condensers should be at least 6 meters above the roof of the industry, or as prescribed by SPCB if that area, depending on how congested is that area where industries are located. And whichever value is higher, one has to follow that. Vent should also have proper, charcoal absorption media or proper pollution control measure to ensure that total TOC which is being let out from these vents is always less than or equal to 20 ppm. So these are regulatory conditions. Monitoring of source and fugitive emissions at prescribed frequencies. Initially, they ask for quarterly monitoring, and progressively they go for annual monitoring and reporting to CPCB. Provision of proper fire and safety arrangements and spark and flame-proof electrical installations, so that in case of accidents, installations should not, because of electrical dysfunctioning, should not catch fire. Discarded drums and barrels should be either sent to originator from where the solvents or waste is coming, or should be handed over to authorized handler of these waste. Hazardous waste generated in the process should either be sent to treatment, storage and disposal facility, which is common hazardous waste disposal facility, or if there's a cement kiln in the vicinity, it should be sent for co-processing in cement kilns. Much like petroleum refining processes or say LPG plants, vehicles entering the premises should have spark arresters, and which is necessary because spark should not lead to fire. Any environmental damage arising out of handling has to be dealt with as per CPCB guidelines, and CPCB now has come out with a kind of formula where they can calculate very easily the damage which you have caused or which you might cause, and that much penalty otherwise you'll have to pay. Citing of these industries in industrial notified area, and provision of online detectors, alarms, and analyzers for any emergency which is happening. Not only for ambient or environment or water environment or soil, CPCB has also prescribed a permissible emission levels for say typically these solvents, toluene, xylene, cyclohexane, acetone. These are the solvents, list of solvents which are very commonly used, and total weighted average at the workplace for the 8-hour monitoring, you should not exceed these values which are prescribed, so that people are not unduly exposed to these solvents. In all, overall, summarizing what CPCB has basically mentioned, they have also provided a checklist so that one can keep track of each of these actions in the form of checklist. And quickly running through what we have discussed previously: tankers and HDP drums for receiving spent solvents, connection of vents with tanker, vents of the tanker with spent solvent during loading and unloading so that solvent vapors don't escape. Solvent transfer pump, use of solvent transfer pump instead of direct transfer from drums or storage tanks. Solvent transfer pump also for transferring solvent, spent solvent from storage tank to distillation unit, which is meant for recycling solvent. Connection of these tankers to the vent while loading and unloading. And vent, as I said, should be connected to condenser, and vehicle fitted with spark arrestor. Thermic fluid heater or electric heating system should be used for distillation. No fire-based system, because fire-based systems are prone to catching fire. So all the heating in the distillation should be done by fluid heating, thermic fluid heating or electric heating. Provision of proper distillation column. Water as a cooling medium is prescribed if boiling point of the solvent is above 100 degrees centigrade. And provision of cooling tower. Secondary condition, if the boiling point of the solvent which you want to separate is less than 100 degrees centigrade, then secondary condenser is also required with chilled water or brine as a cooling unit, and VOC absorption media connected to condenser to absorb all the fugitive VOC or process VOC which is escaping. Height of the vent, as I said, 6 meters or as prescribed by State Pollution Control Board. Dedicated hazardous waste storage area for the residues which are generated. Fire safety arrangements for spark and flame proof installations. And license from Petroleum and PSO from Government of India for storing and working on these materials. And installation of online analyzers for TOC at the vent outlet so that to ensure that these concentrations are maintained below those limits, less than 20 ppm for TOC. So with this, I'll end my presentation here, and I'll be very happy to answer any of the queries which you might have. Thank you, Sanjeev. Over to you.
Thank you, Dr. Pandey. It was really nice and encouraging and very insightful. Am I audible?
Yes, you are.
Yeah, very insightful. Thank you so much again for a very insightful presentation on hazardous waste management, particularly on the handling solvent waste management. It was really encouraging, and how to handle the solvent, how critical it is to handle the solvent exposure properly. I mean, it was really wonderful. So the top approach, the TOP, the way you defined it, that is very critical to minimize the solvent exposure risk. You also defined importance of safety data sheets and the informations to be carried in this SDS. These things are really very critical, and I'm sure all the participants must have learned a lot from your presentations. As always, we are really getting good feedback for your presentations. It was really wonderful. And again, I would request all the participants, if they have any question to Dr. Pandey or Dr. Jugal Kishore or Dr. Mittal, who will be presenting next, please put in your questions in the question and answer box. We'll address it, get it addressed by all the experts at the end of the session. So thank you, Sunil Pandey sir, for taking your time out and giving an excellent, wonderful presentation. So now moving forward, our next presentation is on occupational health regulations. And for that, I would request and welcome Dr. Ashish Mittal, who is the CEO of Occupational Health and Safety Management Consultancy Services. But before we hand over the session to Dr. Mittal, I would like to give a brief introductory profile of Dr. Mittal. Dr. Mittal is a medical law and management graduate and has been working as occupational health consultant for more than 25 years. He has enriched work experience of medical management, research projects, training advocacy, audits, and consultancy with corporates, MSMEs, government agencies, various civil society organizations, and international forums. Recently, he has been involved in making SOPs, advising various national, international industries and institutions and other on COVID-19. I mean, that is very critical, sir. COVID-19, we all know how badly we all are hit. And faculty of various webinars and like conferences organized by government of India and other state government. He is a founding member of Occupational Health and Safety Management Consultancy Service, International Conference on Occupational and Environmental Health, ICOEH, Association of Occupational and Environmental Health, AOEH, in the Service of Mankind, ITSOM. He has been member of the teams for designing, advocating, implementing the complete rehabilitation of workers suffering for occupational disease like silicosis, seaway workers at various national consultations, local governments, and many more. So I'm sure, sir, you have a very rich experience and expertise, and you have very vast knowledge. All the participants are listening, waiting to listen to you. So over to you, Dr. Mittal, for your presentation. Please take over.
Thank you, Mr. Sanjeev. Thank you for the introduction, and I'm very happy to share my presentation with the participants. Thing is, basically, we all know that we are struggling with occupational health as such in India. And even if we see the last few months scenario, we have many accidents. Am I audible? Hello.
Yes, you are. Yes, you are. Please go ahead.
Yeah. Thank you. Yeah. Thank you. So we have seen that many accidents have happened, and we have seen that many things are reported as accidents or accidental deaths. But we have a plethora of occupational diseases which are missing from this scenario, and there are many regulations which have been there internationally, nationally also. But I think once I start sharing my presentation, we know that still we have a large way to go to accomplish what is the intent of these legislations or regulations. So I'll start with the presentation, and yeah. So showing this slide is very crucial, I think, because if we see that making a shirt in a US or making a shirt in Bangladesh, the cost difference is there. And why this cost difference is there, we have to understand that. The same shirt with the same kind of material, with the same kind of stitching, with the same kind of everything, in Bangladesh it will cost around $4, and in US it will cost around $13. Difference of $9. Although we can see the comparison, the laundry cost is little high in US, material cost is a little high in the US, but the major difference between the two countries could be the labor cost. And we can see the difference, which is $0.2 in Bangladesh labor cost, whereas in US that is $7.47 in labor cost. The difference is not that they are paid so well that there is a difference of like so much, but the additional this cost, labor cost, is calculated on behalf of what they go for the health and safety. The difference of labor cost could be like here the laborer may be paid $0.2 per shirt, and there it could be $1 or $2, and rest of the $5 they are going in the safety and health, improving the safety and health conditions of these workers. And we have seen that because of these cost differences, most of the productions which are hazardous in nature have come to all of us, which we call third world countries. Because over here, the legislations are not so hard. And where we can think of like people can get away with the lower labor cost, which we overall calculate, and then the scenario is different. But that is how we are paying for these kind of low cost, low safety and health cost. Because if we remember that on May 19, 2013, in Bangladesh, one single factory collapse, which was not inhabitable, where more than 1,000 workers were working, almost 1,200 people have died in one single factory collapse. Right. So that is the difference where we are as of now, and it is all these recent events in the past few months also indicate that we are lacking with and playing with the safety of our employers and employees and everyone. So that is the scenario, and where we feel that the role of occupational health regulations or legislations is much important, because of what we see is in developed countries, most of these people have settled with uh, uh, say for example, if there any incidents happen, the factory, even one single person, they have to compensate, the factory may go bankrupt. Here we are not doing this. Compensation is heard, but not on behalf of the employers. It is by the government compensation or through the way of ESIC or other things. But the employers are not as such responsible for the compensation of any disease or death of the person. So understanding the occupational health, basically, once we want to understand the regulations, the intent of the regulations or legislation, I think we should understand what is health, occupational health as per se, and occupational safety. And I'll progress towards the legislation and intent of legislation. So health, it is, we say that this is not merely the absence of disease, but this is a state of complete physical, mental, and social well-being. And the study of health or disease, in fact, is the study of interaction of man and his environment. So we know that every disease is caused by some of the factors which are present in the environment. For example, if we see these days COVID, so we know that this is a virus. We know there are bacteria, there are parasites, and there are pollutants, there are chemicals which can cause diseases. So we know that there is interaction of human being and his environment. So this environment is different for like external environment and internal environment. And if we see the human body, it's a very unique machine with its own checks and balances. Uh, we don't have to look for like how to the digestion is going inside our body. It is automatic, and if we eat something which is harmful to our body, it will indicate, right? And like also here we are like in this room, we are hearing each other, we are seeing each other, we are processing that information without any switch and switch offs, right? So, and this human body reacts very uniquely to internal and external factors or environment. In the same environment, same room, somebody may feel a little cold, somebody may feel suffocated, somebody may feel little warm. So this is how our bodies are reacting to individually to these environments. That is why the difference of disease is also there. Somebody will get COVID, somebody will not get COVID, somebody will get in the same environment. People are working in one factory. Out of 100, 10 may get disease and 90 may not get disease. So the reaction of our body is very unique to these stimulus. So the study of disease is really the study of human being and environment, and the environment is internal environment where harmonious function of each and every component, tissue and organ system of the body. So we don't require to switch on, switch off digestion. We don't need like processing once we are seeing. So we are listening also. All those things are happening simultaneously. And external environment is where we spend like our life. So our 24 hours, say for example, of home, which is a domestic environment, how we are living, what is our lifestyle. So we are saying some lifestyle diseases like blood pressure, sugar, and other things. So this is like how we eat, how we spend our day, whether we are exercising or not. All those things are there. And then is the workplace environment, which we call the occupational environment. So out of 24 hours, we spend almost 8, 9, 10 hours at our workplace. Whatever is in the workplace, our body is being influenced by those external stimulus in our environment. So if it is chemical industry, chemicals are having impact on our body. If it is a dust industry, mines, or like stone crushers, so we have different workplace environment. So impact will be different. And then is the community environment, where the socio-economic environment and the larger impact of on body, like as of now, if we see COVID, so it has both occupational dimensions, domestic dimensions, and community dimensions also. Because in a community, we have to respond to all those stimulus, and how our body is responding or how we are behaving will depend on whether we get a disease or not. So we are on a health sickness spectrum. If we see this line, this is a cut-off line, basically we call it. So we can say it is usually we are all in unrecognized sickness frame of health state, right? So we may be having a little deranged lipid profile, or maybe little deranged liver function, or maybe something which is going on, and until unless it comes out as a symptom, we call it unrecognized illness. Once starts mild sickness, once symptoms starts coming, like if it is liver involvement, then if we start having a mild nausea, or maybe we lost our appetite, then we will go for investigations and get recognized that there is something happening to our body, and it could convert into severe sickness, and then ultimately we are losing our body. So that is that. So, but the aim of whatever we are talking about, even wellness programs or regulations, legislations, is freedom from sickness. So from unrecognized sickness, minimum we want to attain is freedom from sickness, better health, so better health and positive health. Means we just want to be every time we are going to be in a frame of physical, mental, and social well-being. So that is positive health. But from going from unrecognized sickness to freedom from sickness is where all these regulations, legislations have the intent, but how they are happening, we'll see. So a disease is basically called it's a we call environmental epidemiological triad. So three factors need to be there for any disease to be caused, right? So agent should be there, host should be there, and environment should be congenial. So for example, if we say that dengue will come in July, August, September months, or the diarrhea will come in May, June, July, because of the environmental factors, where the host, the agent is there, because agent can survive in those conditions. And if we consume stale food in May, June, July, so we can have diarrhea or gastrointestinal diseases, because agent is there, our body is susceptible, and the environment is there to make these agents in plenty. Dengue will be there. So because the agent means that mosquito will be there, and our body, if it is susceptible, will cause the disease. So if we see how we can prevent the disease is basically, if in this whole scenario we want to prevent the disease, we have to prevent this connection between the agent and the host. So if we cut this connection, um, we can prevent the disease. Environment, largely, if we say the external environment, we can't change much. Yes, but occupational environment, we can influence that occupational environment. But here, if we say, for example, we don't consume the stale food or we don't consume the street food, so we will not get the diarrhea. If we protect from mosquito bite, we don't allow the mosquito to breed. Even if it breeds, then we don't allow it to bite us by like putting a door jaliwala door, or like putting full sleeves clothes, or applying some mosquito anti-mosquito agents. So all those things are for preventing this agent and host reaction to each other. So this is exactly what happens in occupational epidemiological triad, where source is there. Source means chemical, dust, noise, fumes, whatever is there, and there is worker, and then media is basically the environment where these two things are working together. So here also, if we want to prevent the disease, we have to cut the connection between these two. So largely this occupational health, which we have tried to understand in recent years in India, is very old otherwise. As early as 4th century BC, Hippocrates noted lead toxicity in mining. And in 1st century AD, Roman scholar Pliny the Elder, he recognized the health risk of working with zinc and sulfur. He devised face mask made from animal bladder, urinary bladder. So see, basically in 1st century AD, right? So there also people have started recognizing that if you are working with such and such material, and there are some particular diseases which are happening, and people have started preventing them also with the whatever it was available. Like they can think of animal bladder, urinary bladder, and they made a mask, face mask from that to prevent the inhalation of this zinc and sulfur and to protect the workforce. In 1556, German scholar Agricola has written a book, De Re Metallica, and he described the disease of miners and prescribed preventive measures. So, like more than 300 years ago, also, not 300, it's like almost 500 years ago. So, we have the evidence that people have started preventing the diseases, occupational diseases, let's say, we say. In 1700, like 300 years back, Bernardo Ramazzini, who is known as the father of industrial medicine, published the first comprehensive book called De Morbis Artificum Diatraba, The Diseases of Workmen. He asserted that occupational diseases should be studied in the work environment rather than in hospital wards. He encouraged that doctors should visit the workplace, they should understand the workplace environment, and then they should correlate the symptoms, and they try to understand the disease of these workers and then correlate everything to their workplace environment. So rather than sitting in the hospital wards and people are coming to say their symptoms, but if they don't understand the workplace environment, they won't understand the disease, right? So this all happened in 1700, and the first act, which we know, first legislation came in Chimney Sweepers Act in 1788, because people recognize that people who are cleaning the chimneys of steel plants, they were getting the urinary bladder cancers in very high numbers. To like recognize that and to prevent those workers from getting these cancers, the Chimney Sweepers Act came in 1788. Britain established the Factories Act in the beginning of 1833, and which we have adopted in 1948 is almost replica of British Factories Act. Ours is 1948. So we have adopted most of the things from this British Factory Act, which was adopted in 1833. And then came the US, from US it came Workers' Compensation Law in 1911, right? So even like more than 100 years back, we were compensating these workers for occupational diseases. In India, if we see the advent of occupational health legislations, so in India, the Workmen Compensation Act came in 1923 and the Factories Act came in 1948. Here, we must recognize this that Workmen Compensation means Compensation Act came before than the Preventive Act of Factories Act, which was almost like 25 years later. The intent over here was, in the beginning, it was that if you are working for me in very hazardous conditions or very dangerous conditions, if you get injury or disease, I'll compensate you. So you work for me, you get the disease or injury, I'll compensate you for that disease or injury. So initial legislations was focusing on philanthropy, right? So the health was being compensated in terms of money. Factories Act is more proactive act, which has most of the things like preventive aspects. So it was to protect the environment, human beings, and machinery from damages, and how safe we can be in our working environment, in at least in manufacturing or factory units, right? So that was later on, and then came the ESI Act of 1948. Simultaneously, if somebody is like we have to care for the medical aspect, so we can provide them medical things also. Mines Act came in 1952. Dock Workers Act came in 1986. And then we have Bhopal gas tragedy 1984. We have the Environmental Protection Act in 1986. So the chronologically, if we see that most of the things were like coming once we need them, or it was afterthought. And occupational health and safety, there is no comprehensive legislation as of now, till now. I mean, if we see all this, what was happening in last before 2000 kind of thing. So basically, thing is here, if we see these acts were having some of the clauses for occupational health and safety. Say, for example, how the medical examination should be done, what periodicity should be, and where to employ a doctor, how to employ a doctor, what should be the qualifications of those doctors, and if there is no non-compliance, what is the like penalties or all those things. So it was covered in bit and pieces in most of these acts, but comprehensive act was not there in India till now. So we know that it was that occupational diseases kill 6 times as many people. Accident attracts greater attention. So what happens is basically, if say for example, we know that in one factory collapse, 1,200 people have died because of accident, but we don't know how many people there, because it was a government factory, how many people were suffering from bicyanosis, which is caused by the cotton thread, right? So an estimate is that bicyanosis will kill 6 times more people than the accident which was in that Bangladesh factory has happened, right? So diseases, they go unnoticed because we have not a very good coverage of recognition of these occupational diseases. Because if somebody comes with shortness of breath or breathing difficulty, and he is working in a factory where cotton is being spinned, ginned, or it's a garment factory, So as a doctor, I may consider this as a asthma case. I may consider it's a bronchitis case, but I may not correlate the disease to its occupation. So the recognition is very poor, but ILO estimates that it kills 6 times more people than the uh, accidents. And annually, 2.34 million work-related deaths are there. And out of that, 2.02 million are due to work-related disease. So it represents daily average of 5,500 deaths. I can say this data is by ILO, but this doesn't represent few of the countries like us. We don't report these diseases or deaths to very extent, right? I can think of what, like from 2014, I think yes, 2009 to 2014, we have reported only 726 occupational diseases as of full of India, right? And those, I mean, we can understand if I'll show you more of my own work where you can recognize that this is not such a case. So it is, I think this has been already discussed that we have occupational hazards as physical, chemical, biological, ergonomic, psychosocial, and accidental occupational hazards. And we have a risk and hazard exposure. We measure it in like TLVs, TWA, time weighted average values. So how much exposure can our body can endure during 8 hours? Say for example, benzene, how much it should be in our environment in an 8 hours work shift, right? So which doesn't harm my body. So these are few of the examples. STEL is short-term exposure limit. So if there is a spill of a chemical, so I can endure that spill for 15 minutes with whatever PPEs is required for that spill, right? But beyond that, I may get harm. So all these things have been there and have been established largely in most of the countries. There may be differences of we are still having world values which are now, say for example, lead exposure. If blood lead levels are still, we are following that it should be below 5, but internationally it should be there should be no lead in your body, so it should be 0. So we are somewhere like progressing, but still we are not with the international standards. So if we again go this occupational hazards. So this is flood situation where if police is having such kind of exposure, and this is not one time, they have to go through this many times, and then how many things you can think of in this water can be of harmful to the anybody who is exposed to these kind of flood waters, right? Sewage will be mixed, chemical will be mixed, and all those things will be there, and human exposure is there, right? Again, if we see the firefighters, rescue people, all those people are again exposed to so many chemicals, physical activities, psychosocial, ergonomics. So all is there. And again, we can see the physical impact, right? Maybe loss of limb, loss of uh, capacity, movements, all those things. But can we recognize psychosocial trauma or what is happening inside the body? How much diseases they were carrying inside the body? So this is what we see in our own country. This is a formal factory registered under Factories Act, but without any PPEs, without any safety shoes, without any eye goggles. So if you see this child below 15 who is working in a factory is wearing a specs to protect his eye from this fly, from the wheel, right? And but other places, if you see here, all chemicals on hand, diseases and all those things, high temperature of 1200, more than 1200, 1400 degrees centigrade, and people are without even safety shoes and without even chappals, because they say that if this spills on their feet, and if they are wearing anything, it will stick on it. But if they are barefoot, they can just like remove this molten metal from their feet. So this is the scenario what we see in day-to-day conditions. Here also, if we see, this is um, silicosis basically. So, so, uh, so this person is just, I mean, 35 kg of weight, no ability to work, and he is so short of breath he can't fetch a glass of water. Here we see people working like this, how ergonomically drained their body will be doing this work for whole day, right? So even this home-based industries where these people are working in handloom weavers, so they are sitting in a pit. So all those things are recognizing, and if you see this, the nasal bone has disappeared, and people don't know. This is chrome ulcers, and this is in chrome plating industry. And if you go to any small scale industries, out of 20 people, I have seen 18 people without nasal septum bones, right? So, but we are not recognizing, we are not protecting, we are not compensating. So all those things are there, in spite of Chrome ulcers being a notifiable occupational disease, right? So this is eye injury with the alkali spill. This is wrist drop with the lead toxicity. So this person won't be able to, unable to straighten his wrist. This wrist is always be like this, flexed. So there is no strength basically in this wrist, so it won't be able to straighten his wrist. So this is nerve injury because of lead toxicity. We recognize this day out, day in. We see these sewer people who are cleaning sewer lines. This is again silicosis. People, I mean, they die at 45 years of age, right? So this is the lung condition of silicosis, silicotic patient. So this is kind of normal lung. It should be like this, but this whole lung has collapsed. This is consolidated, right? So we saw this happening around, like again, children working from home-based industries or workshops, women workers who are like employed in like in tea gardens. So this is basically, we did a one study where 90%, 97% of the women complaints of backache, right? Here, this poor lit area, people are working from 5 in the morning till 10 in the night to for hand-woven clothes, right? This is electronic waste scenario where people segregate the electronic waste. They take out the capacitors and burn the plates to collect the metals, right? So this is formal industries where women are employed, and this is the hazardous industries, foundries where women are working, right? So again, they are exposed to so many things. So all these things, if we go sector-wise or whatever we see, this is huge unsafe conditions, right? 40 to 50% of the world population are at risk, work-related risk. So all those hazards they are exposed to, right? So these are, I mean, we can think of these figures as a small token, but most of the things are beyond our capacity to think, right? If we see that monetary wise, it is 2 to 14% of gross national product loss because of these occupational diseases. Because we are producing at one time, but we are losing in the disease on the other hand, right? So this is some of the things which we can go, because time is going fast. So I just want to be on the side of legislation. So this is what the scenario is. And if we think that occupational diseases are very few, as we have seen that they are high in number, here is the occupational risk. If we compare that, we know, everybody know that high cholesterol is a danger to human being, right? But if we see that this is high cholesterol, but the occupational risks are more, even much more than that. And if we think of high glucose, I mean the diabetes, right? So we are, this is high fasting plasma glucose. So this is diabetes, sorry. And this is diabetes bar, and this is occupational bar. So how much we know of high diabetes in past so many years as compared to occupational risks, which are as good as um, diabetes, right? So these are few again data that injuries kill how many people, or new cases per year, how many cases are, but this is 1999 data, and this is still need to be updated because many of the countries, they don't uh, pool in these kind of data. So this is just one part. If we think of that, this is one part of the world. So going to the legislations, there are few international agencies like ILO, WHO, IARC, IPCS, ACGIH. These are framing few of the conventions for occupational health, or they are like providing how this the, like for example, American Conference of Government and Industry Hygienists. They provide the TLVs or TWAs or the other things, so that we are at par with the every country. Where if we think of like exposure to benzene, it should be regulated to 25 ppm or 20 ppm or 5 ppm. So this is the agency who guides us. But this is not mandatory for, as for India we concerned. So we go by Factories Act, where the upper limits are given, or TLVs or STEL values are given. So International Program or Chemical Safety, they provide for like the chemical, how to handle chemicals and all those. Professor Pandey has shown us that MSDS and everything is there. IARC is basically for cancer research. So which chemical is carcinogenic, and there are almost 72 chemicals has been confirmed carcinogens as of now. WHO is to frame the overall scenario for occupational health, and ILO is basically working on 3Ds. Um, Decent work, they look for decent work. So dirty, dangerous, and one more thing is there. So they try to work on those issues, right? Enforcement authorities are different than these authorities. In USA, it is OSHA, Occupational Safety and Health Administration, who keeps a tab of who is filing the final things to them, complying the law or not. In the United Kingdom, it's Health and Safety Executive. In Australia, it's WorkSafe Australia. In Malaysia, Department of Occupational Safety and Health. In India, we have Ministry of Labour. Through Factory Inspectorate, they monitor these aspects. But this is for the formal workplaces, not for the informal workplaces or the unorganized workplaces like agriculture. People who have pesticide poisoning and who are working in other unorganized sectors, we don't have any reporting system of those people, right? So ILO conventions ratified by India, which are in force, are there are very few, right? So, but we have not ratified many of them as of now. So we know India is land of diversity, 520 million workers, less than 1%, 10% of the workforce in organized sector, 60% is unorganized, and 30% don't have regular jobs. So all those people who are still to be considered in this occupational health scenario or legislations or regulations, almost, if we say 10% only are being recognized as a, like where we think that occupational health regulations will work out, right? So this I will skip. So we know that we have many issues. It is large unorganized workforce, women, elderly workers, child labor, migrant workers, contract workers, bonded labor, hazardous working conditions, poor socioeconomic conditions, poor access to occupational healthcare services. And as of now, we see that most of the new jobs being created in the formal sector are actually informal, as workers do not have access to employment benefits or social security. So they are not being covered under ESIC, PPF, or all those things. So which is again jeopardizing to all these occupational health legislations we have talking about. So again, this is much of the data is debatable, because this is few things which we can get through some of the resources, but I think they are all just the registered units. Again, unregistered home-based units and all those things are not represented over here, and we have a large chunk of occupational diseases or things which are not being covered by the present occupational health legislations, right? So we have women worker, which are integral part of the workforce. So again, we have not much. Say, for example, the occupational health legislation covering the maternity benefits or the maternity leave kind of thing. So that was part of occupational health legislation, and it was increased from I think up to 6 months of maternity leave under Occupational Health Act, basically. So there are many issues which are still we are not recognizing many of the our legislations, like work schedules or hours. Now the occupational code has come. I'll discuss that in a while. So sexual harassment at workplace, leave policy, transport. So many of the things are not still part of the occupational legislations, right? So we have constitutional provisions for occupational health and safety, Article 24 and Article 42 of Constitution. They prohibit like many of the things which are part of occupational health legislations. We have many acts, occupational health legislations, Workmen Compensation Factories Act. So I'll go through these once we discuss the code. But main was, if we think as a formal organization of health legislation, occupational health legislation, that was Factories Act, and it has 3 schedules and many other things which I will go through again. So this is article, again, Constitution of India, abolition of untouchability, because workplaces, touchability and all those issues still exist in many places. Prohibition of traffic of human beings and forced labor, then prohibition of employment of children in factories, then is to strive to provide everyone certain vital public health conditions such as health of workers, men, women and children, right to work, educate and public assistance in certain cases, just and human working conditions. So Article 42 is just and human working conditions of work and maternity leave. So this is by constitution. So if we start from there, I'll skip through these few of the things which are just the basic of how these regulations are formed. So I'll just skip this. So main was Factories Act, as we know of occupational health legislation, and that has 11 chapters, 3 schedules, but now this all has gone. Factories Act, I'll just go through this. Okay, so in this Factories Act, there should be a occupational health center in a factory which is carrying out the hazardous process. Factories up to 50 workers, doctor should be on retainership. 51 to 200 workers, it should be proper OHS, occupational health center room, and one part-time factory medical officer. More than 200 workers, it should be one full-time factory medical officer. And role of occupational health services ranges from preventive, curative, emergency, training, networking, recording and reporting of data, rehabilitation, medical surveillance, and coordination with safety department. Mandatory exam. This medical surveillance consists of mandatory examinations like pre-placement examination. So before joining the workplace, person should undergo the medical examination. Periodic medical examination every year, 6 monthly or quarterly. So depending upon the exposure, that need to be done. And if somebody is sick or injured, return to work examination is there. So all those things were there. So for worker, it is to ensure the right to safety, right to be informed, right to choose, right to be heard, right to seek redressal, and right to education and training. For worker, the occupational health law should provide all these aspects. And it gives the obligation to the workers also that they should not willfully interfere or misuse any appliances or convenience for other workers, shall willfully do anything likely to endanger himself or others, shall willfully neglect the make use of appliances or PPEs provided. So there are obligatory also. So we know this is this was happened in last 6 months. The injuries or the accidents which has happened in last few months. Then it is prevention also in these legislations, how to control the risk, which has given the hierarchy of control, like how to eliminate, how to substitute, or how to like administratively control all these occupational health uh, um, exposures, right? So, and this will skip. Okay. So, okay. So, thing is basically the implementation part is poor, as we see that people are not safety conscious. They are working more towards danger rather than to prevent danger. So these pictures are real pictures which can indicate that even in spite of having regulations, legislations in place for many years, still we are long way to go. We have to think out of the box. Just very small changes in the workplaces or exposure assessment or doing all those things which we think of can help us preventing the diseases, right? So I'll quickly go through just to glimpse like how to innovate safety, how to innovate health issues. These are all kind of things. So changes from animal bladder to very sophisticated respiratory masks, from compensation legislation to preventive welfare legislation, from disease cure to prevention of the disease, from accidents to safe practices, but we have to go from worker to a human being. So we have to think of a human being. The change has happened. So in 2020, we have the Occupational Health and Safety Code. Now this is the umbrella legislation for the occupational health and safety. So all the 39 labor laws has been converted into 4 codes. OHS code is one code. Industrial relationship code is one another code. Social security code is another code. So they have been like clubbed together. So there are many changes. Even like last week on 19th of November, the under this code, the rules has been also been framed by the central government. So I'll skip because most of this code will be covered in those 5 minutes of my presentation. What is the latest last week has happened. So this will be this code will be covered over there. I'll just go through this. So this is the gadget notification on 19th of November last week by Ministry of Labor and Employment. So this 13 labor laws which were for the occupational health and safety have been abolished as of now. In suppression of these 13 labor laws, the Occupational Health Code has superseded. right? So Occupational Safety, Health and Working Conditions Code 2020, right? So that has taken over all these 13 laws, which cover dock workers, building and other construction workers, model factory rules, mines rules, rescue rules. So all those things, they have been converted into one occupational safety code. So draft rule says that you have to that this is applicable to whole of India, and it will come into force from the final publication of the official gazette. And chapter 2 is for registration of the industrial unit under this code for like many of the things, right? So this is single window application for registration under occupational health and safety code. So chapter 3 describes the duties of the employers and employees. Annual health medical examination is one part of this, and letter of appointment. This is made mandatory. No employee should be employed in any establishment unless he has been issued a letter of appointment. So in the prescribed form, which is as this, so here even in the appointment letter, it is mandatory to have a health checkup written over there, and applicability of social security benefits, right? Then if we see that all things are there, so labor identification number. So say for example, if he leaves this organization, he joins new organization, so it will be carried forward with all the informations, right? So this is there have been provided. And then section 8 of this rules provide that notice of the accident and dangerous occurrences in particular form has to be provided to the inspector cum facilitator. So now the inspector, which used to be under Factories Act known as inspector, is now known as inspector cum facilitator or chief inspector cum facilitator. So that is the again change in the nomenclature of the people who are into the enforcement of these laws. So which will be having many of the impacts which we see with the coming few months, that how this is being implemented. And they have to be reported within 12 hours of any accident or dangerous occurrence, right? And then it is the notice of the disease. So if somebody is diseased, then it has to be notified to the concerned authority by the medical officer who is in charge of that facility, right? So it has to be notified to again inspector cum facilitator or chief inspector of the factories, right? So there are different chapters basically related to occupational health and safety. So it will be a National Occupational Safety and Health Advisory Board, which will be formed, and then state advisory boards will be there, and they will be looking after every implementation part of this occupational safety code, right? Composition of the safety committee is again given except mines, and in case of mine, who will be the members of this safety committee. Functions of safety committees are given: hours of work and annual leave, maintenance of register of records and returns. So of dangerous occurrences and accidents and everything has to be recorded and to be provided at the time of inspections or maybe as annual returns. Appointment of medical officer under section this, duties of the medical officer, um, periodic medical exam, initial and periodic medical examination. So change is from pre-employment medical examination, it is initial medical examination. Periodic medical examination, in case of mine, it's annually, or it depends upon the other places. It will depend upon how the schedule is giving that medical examination. So examining authorities is described as maybe medical practitioner or any government medical officer can do. The examining authority shall be trained in occupational health course, including ILO classification of chest radiograph. So again, if this is under law, and I think in India, very few people who have been trained in ILO classification of chest radiograph And there is, as of now, I don't know if there is any government course which is being run by government to train doctors to undergo this. So there are still many discrepancies and administrative difficulties to implement this code, right? So the nature of medical notice of medical examination. So on the initial like pre-implement medical examination, within 7 days it should be done, and for notice of periodic medical examination should be given 20 days prior to the medical date. And then if somebody failed to undergo medical examination, what are the liabilities and all those things. So standard and report of medical examination is their retention and transfer of medical certificates. So after retirement, 5 years is the criteria to retain the medical examinations in this rules. And if somebody is being transferred to any another or relocating to any other job, he should be given the medical data to him, right? So constitution of the appellate medical board. So all those things are there. I'll just finish because these are the latest of what we call occupational health regulations as of now. And then it is the medical examination, notice of the accident and dangerous occurrences, and it is even given the occupational diseases. So this is the crux of what is happening new in occupational health legislation. This has to be seen in larger aspect, and we are thinking that this will be an umbrella legislation for occupational health. But the implementation part and the how it is beneficial to the whole of the employment is we have to see how it happens. So I think I have taken much of time, but I'll just finish by saying that winning doesn't always mean being first. Winning means you are doing better than what you have done before. So thinking of about last 500 years, so we are still on the way to be improved, to do better day by day. Thank you very much for your patience and for, I think I have taken 20 minutes more. Sorry for that, but I finish my presentation. Thank you. Over to you, Sanjeev, please.
Thank you, Dr. Mittal. My voice, okay? Is it audible? Sanjeev?
Yeah, it is audible.
Yeah, I thought it was echoing. Yes, so Dr. Mittal, thank you so much for your very detailed presentation. And I think every time, as I mentioned earlier, also during the third OTP, every time we see presentations from our experts, we end up learning more, even though we've seen these presentations, few of these slides earlier. But the last part of your presentation specifically, which mentioned about the new codes, the gadget which had been issued recently, as recent as last week, right? Absolutely a week before, a week earlier, that was on 19th. We are at par now, I could say, with the international best practices, international best standards, at least from the nomenclature perspective, where we now call it Occupational Safety Code, other than these 13 or long list of acts what we had, and they've been all been compressed. In fact, there is a question also where a gentleman asked, called Chandrasekhara, Mr. Chandrasekhara, he asked, during, because of this COVID situation, has these safety laws or these environmental laws, have they diluted? But before I hand it over to you to answer, along with Sunil Pandeyji, who's also our esteemed guest speaker today, and as always, he's been also very, very supportive to these OTPs. I think COVID, I would, at the cost of repetition, that this entire COVID crisis has really, in a way, when it will be remembered, like the Spanish flu is remembered, it was 100 years back. When this phase will be remembered in future, I think there would be, other than the challenges it has brought, and health crisis and economic crisis, I think there are a lot of positives which have also come out, and that is the beauty of mankind. I think with those accidents, initial accidents which happened industrial accidents, which happened on I think it was 9th of May or 7th of May. 7th of May, the Vizag accident happened. I think it was the same day when 2 more such similar accidents had happened in Tamil Nadu and one in Gujarat. We have been talking about, revising our existing laws and codes and, making them better, improving them, improvising on them. But I think it was that push during that COVID time and restarting of industries happened. These accidents happened, and we were, the authorities, the industries, I would say itself, were sort of taken off guard. And with the fresh guidelines being introduced to restart industries by NDMA 2 days after that accident, and this eventually this code, labor law codes being changed. NDMA is now revising the national guidelines on chemical disasters, which were last issued in 2007 by none other than our chairman of CIDM board, who was then the founding member of National Disaster Management Authority, Lieutenant General Dr. J.R. Bhardwaj. All these have really been, expedited during these COVID times, which were long due anyways. And I'm sure Dr. Mittal and Dr. Pandey, you'll agree with me that, but this entire phase, this entire challenging phase has given that impetus on, to the authorities, to the industries, to focus on those gap areas which have been lingering for a long time. And I really appreciate the way you really, Mittal Sahab, which you highlighted those important codes and important nomenclature and terminologies. I think that is all very beneficial to the audience we have, which are almost, which were 400 number, almost 350 now. I think this is phenomenal. I think we are doing, as I was telling Dr. Anil Gupta yesterday, that NIDM and FICCI coming together, FICCI's CIDM board specifically, I think coming together to curate industrial safety related webinar, then conferences, and now these OTPs. I think this is great service to the nation, great service to the community, apart from obviously being great service to the industries. And one of the highlights of your presentation overall, I heard Dr. Pandey also talking, and so did Dr. Jugal Kishore, and now your presentation also, Dr. Mittal. I think hazards related to the industries are basically two broad categories, and they are, they can't be taken in isolation. They have to be considered together, which are safety and injury hazards and health and illnesses hazards. Because if you do not focus on the health and illnesses hazard, then obviously the numbers look much more brighter and much more encouraging. But actually, they are the actual numbers which which really should be a point of bother for the authorities and for the industries and for the leadership in the industries. That is an equally important subject. Safety and injury is definitely one of the things which we need to undertake, for a human being, as you said. But health and illnesses should also be taken along at the same time. Brief comments from you, Dr. Mittal. What do you? Anything you would like to add to this?
Yeah, true, Rubag. Thing is, basically, we have been focusing on accidents, not on the diseases. So that is where we have been lacking. And we as a doctors are also not trained to look for those diseases, right? So, I mean, very few simple examples where I have been thinking of that we need a relook to even how we train ourselves in medical guidance. Because either it should be a different scenario course to be imparted to everyone. Like we have tried, say for example, in mines area, we have trained doctors. We have given training to those doctors to earliest see basically if we can recognize the disease earliest, we can prevent further damage to these people, right? And they are preventable, they are not curable. So that is very sure that once the lung damage starts, we can't do anything.
Yes, absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Dr. Sunil Pandey, hello, sir, and I would like to ask you a question which is coming from Dr. Colonel Ram Athavale. How are you doing, sir? Good to see you.
Yep.
Do we have any mandatory regulations for remediation processes and waste pit preparations? We see many cases of waste being dumped in the open without any processing. Are there any regulations?
It's actually broadly, there's nothing called, nothing in the terms of regulation for preventing illegal disposal. State to state, the consent conditions which are given to industries, they vary and they take care of such incidences. One is illegal disposal outside your factory premises. One is improper disposal within your factory premises. That is dealt by consent conditions when they are issued and kind of annual reports and inspections of pollution control board. But as a regulation, there's no specific regulation on this.
All right. And Manoj Popoli asks, what is the PISO rule for storage of solvent barrels? I don't know.
Say it again. What is?
What is the PISO's, the regulatory body PISO's rule for storage of solvent barrels?
PISO essentially deals with kind of explosion of fire hazard. Whenever you are storing a hazardous chemical or inflammable chemical, so they give you directions on how, what should be container material in terms of so that it's not reacting with the chemical or solvent which you are storing, and also at what pressure. If a solvent has to be stored at pressure, then what should be thickness of the container, what should be safety and leakage arrangement mechanism for alarm mechanism for firefighting, and all that is and that license is required whenever you are storing hazardous chemical or hazardous solvent at the premises. So that license is required from PISO, and then they provide you these case to case. Every chemical has a different condition. So case to case basis, they provide these conditions. You'll be surprised even for biogas, which you do for from waste biogas projects. The biogas storage also requires a PISO license.
Oh,
because it's a methane. It's a kind of a storage of methane at pressure. So, and methane, when it comes in contact with air, it kind of catches fire. And methane also has exposure hazard. So all these are controlled by, guided by PISO.
okay. Thank you. There's a question from Vishal Barve. He asks, where can we find the fitness to work requirement? What medical test required for which job? Dr. Pandey or Dr. Mittal, would you like to, anyone of you?
I think Mr. Mittal would be better.
Yeah.
Yeah. Basically, basically in Factories Act, there was in every schedule, there was scheduled occupations or the industries. Say, for example, if it is a foundry, so it has to be every 6 months. What medical examination, for example, there was mandatory 3 years X-ray test, and every year there should be physical medical examination along with certain other medical examinations. But as of now, with this new rules coming, so until unless states they form their rules, the general guidance is depending upon the need or what is the exposure over there. For example, if it is people who are working in noise-induced hearing loss, high noise area, so we have to do audiometry over there. So we have to conduct the risk assessment. Over the risk assessment, we have to correlate our medical examinations. So somebody who is working with a particular chemical which is liver toxic, so we need to do the liver function test. If it is renal toxic, we need to do renal test. If it is like, for example, I told you chimney workers, so their bladder examination or their ultrasound is mandatory. So it will depend upon industry to industry and how the notification comes from the government that this industry is such a hazardous industry. So depending upon that, the medical examination will be framed. But as of now, in whatever industry we are working, we are framing it. One is minimum mandatory examination, which is prescribed by the government or the law, and other is over and above what we need to do in those areas.
Okay, right. Thank you. In fact, interestingly, we have we have participants from IT and ITS companies also, which is really very impressive. Gravit Kashyap, Gravit Kashyap asks, how many, from an IT and ITES company point of view, is there any difference when it comes to the first aid boxes, or the standards or the minimum standards which one has to maintain for an IT or ITES company from a health point of view? Interesting question.
Yes, it will be like for the as of now we have the mandatory. See, basically we are in transition as of now. So Factories Act was saying that for this particular number in this particular kind of industry, this is the number of first aid boxes required, right? Or the first aid trainers in particular, like if it is a shift work, every shift should have one first aid trainer in that industry. If it is large number, so it should be 3 first aid trainers in each shift. So that particular things were there. But now with this change in whole scenario, and IT comes under Shop and Establishment Act, right? So their norms will be different than the Factories Act. So that is one part which I think of. But it is general guidance, not mandatory guidance, many places, right? So we know that in industry, IT industry, if they are not, as compared to manufacturing units or where construction industry or some places where the rate of injuries are very high, it should be proportionate to particular number of people. But in IT industry, if it is like 100 people or 200 people or 500 people, but if they are not very reported injuries over there, then it could be according to that. But internationally, yes, you can find some guidance, not mandatory frameworks.
Right. Thank you. Thank you. A question for Dr. Pandey from Amit Patel. For solid waste disposal of non-hazardous sludge, what will be the dump criteria, and up to what time we have to maintain this site as per CPCB norms? And if after that period, shall we use again this pit for further use?
For non-hazardous waste, actually, in all probability, most of the non-hazardous waste have some material value and resource value. So if they have some recycle value or resource value, they are always authorized recyclers or processors. And most of the industries, they don't like to stack non-hazardous waste and cover the space. So you time to time auction these, say for example, scrap or paper waste or which is non-contaminated, glass cullets, or such waste are time to time auctioned to people who can recycle and who earn livelihood from there. Things like spent catalyst, for example, in a fertilizer unit or refinery petrochemical units and all that, they are sent for recovery of precious metals which are used as a catalyst. And then they are authorized recyclers for that also. Problem comes when it's a hazardous waste. And hazardous waste, like there are many older industries where there were not enough common waste disposal facilities. They had captive waste disposal facilities within the plant. In Maharashtra, in Gujarat, in many places, Tamil Nadu. Those places need to be treated as a secured hazardous landfill. And when the pits are over, or landfill facility is full, they need to be capped as per compliance for hazardous waste landfills. There can be certain activities. If the landfill area is large, you can probably put up a parking space there once you cap that. Or if still larger, maybe a small golf course or something which doesn't damage your liner, which you use for capping the landfill. So any activity, recreational activity, which doesn't damage the capping, can be taken up there.
Brilliant. In fact, while we are speaking and while you were making the presentation, Dr. Pandey and Dr. Mittal and even Dr. Jugal Kishore's presentation, the series of comments and compliments from the participants, you can see it is flooded on the chat window and even on our private emails. From Professor Manavalan Chandrasekhar, Deepak, and I don't know, the series of such comments, they are mentioning comments and in the question answers also, so that, we could take up their best wishes and their compliments. Abdul asks, is there any specific regulation for appointment of a full-time safety officer in IT establishment, Dr. Mittal? Is there, obviously, you did partially answer this question earlier also.
Pardon, can you repeat the question?
Any specific regulation for appointment of full-time safety officer in an IT establishment?
That I was going through. As such, the rules has given the qualification for safety officers in mines, safety, dock workers, and building and other construction work. So there are eligibilities, but until unless it is notified by a state government, it will not be. I mean, we don't know still that.
Okay, right. One very, I think, an exciting, interesting question, and I would like comments from, if Dr. Pandey would also like to comment on and react on this. With the recent safety codes which have been now introduced, these occupational safety codes, vis-a-vis versus the Factory Act of 1948. What, according to you two gentlemen, what is the key advantage or a key difference, or how is it better? If in your personal opinion, how do you think we have evolved in through and how does it reflect in the new occupational safety code gadgeted recently?
Let me begin. I'm not also very new to this. Probably Mr. Mittal has gone through this more in detail.
Yeah.
The thing which I immediately can follow from Mr. Mittal's presentation is that now it is a single window application for all these 13 regulations.
Absolutely.
And also it tries to unify all of them into one common platform.
So ease of doing business is definitely one of the things which comes out, which is this the current establishment's primary agenda also. The ease of doing business is something. I'm sure this will help us as a country go up a few notches when it comes to determining the ease of doing business, of a country. Dr. Mittal, according to you?
Yeah, Rubab, I was going through, and at places there are dilutions, at places it is strengthening. So it will, it depends upon which side of table you are. So basically depending upon, for employee, it is good that he will be given the appointment letter, even if it is for 10 days. So he will be knowing, he will not be shut down like hire and fire kind of thing. So he will be knowing that he has been hired for 10 days only and not more than 10 days. So he will be looking for another job in due course of time, right? So that kind of things which are better for the employee is there. But then dilution is on the part of the this enforcement, because now if inspector has become the facilitator also. So that means by name itself, it is like you can't enforce many of the things. So facilitator is, you are a guide to that.
Yes.
But then most of legislation part is now going towards self-regulation. So you report that you have done whatever is required under the law, and you are fine, basically. So here, where we are struggling with many of the things, like, for example, there are many questions about mandatory examinations or what medical examination need to be undergo. So it will be, if it is diluted that, okay, I have done medical examination of all my employees and it is selective, inspection. So there it could be like some places we will be losing some of the aspects. But overall, we are still to have how it will impact overall.
Yeah, wonderful. Yes, thank you so much. I think that was a smart answer from both of you, and I think yes, only I think with time this will be, once it is adopted and once it is practiced, I'm sure government would be open to new changes and ideas to make it even more robust and comprehensive in times to come. But I'm glad that, we are all glad that they have taken this up finally, and from a from an economics point of view and also from a health point of view, it will, and overall productivity point of view and profitability point of view, I'm sure this would be turn out to be a good positive step. It was just long due. And these safety codes will be applicable for IT company, Abdul? They'll be applicable to IT companies also, right?
Yeah, I think IT companies, as I know, they are established under Shop and Establishment Act. So most of the things are applicable from that angle. But I think I have not seen in rules also that specifically, say for example, specifically like cine workers, right? Or even this metro workers, they are specifically covered under this rules, right, or the code. But I have not seen the IT specifically being written somewhere that this is separately, mentioned in the code.
Okay, I think that's a fair reaction to this. In fact, there are because they fall under a different category, so there must be some overlaps. But then the category at times is different, for of category of rules, I would say. Dr. Saab, there's a question, Dr. Pandey. With this using of masks and other PPEs. All of these are considered in COVID times as biomedical waste. And if yes, then after disinfecting, can it be categorized as hazardous waste or non-hazardous?
See, actually, what happens is all this COVID or suspect COVID waste, though biomedical waste rule, if you see provisions, they have given you window for some of the material which can be recycled and reused, but after proper disinfection. But in COVID, for the COVID suspect COVID waste, that liberty is not there. They say that preferably after using and cutting them, and so that they are not reused, they should be incinerated. So that if proper disinfection is not there, then case of COVID contamination is not there. So they have taken utmost caution and said that preferably they should be incinerated. And go with the yellow bag to the biomedical waste facility for incineration.
Wow. So I think, sir, we've touched the 5:30 mark almost in a minute, and we've taken more than we had requested the time from you both gentlemen. Thank you so much for your very valuable inputs, very very clear and crisp presentations. The beauty is, all the audience is still left wanting for more, and I'm sure with more courses, OTPs we keep organizing. I have a few participants who are attending for the second time the OTP. So I'm sure they would, so although all these 3 days of OTPs are streamed live on YouTube, and they're always there, they can always go back there and look at your slides and listen to you. But I think the live interaction, and again, thanks to COVID, when we do conferences, physical conferences in like CIDM, the Chemical Industrial Disaster Management Board of FICCI, we've done almost 37 national conferences across the length and breadth of this country, from Sikkim to Shillong to Ahmedabad, and from Kerala to Chandigarh. There's always a limitation for people to travel, and obviously there's a cost attached to it. Paying a fees, because we make it sustainable as well. Here, in last 7 months, what number we had touched, or the people we had reached out through our conferences in 10 years, we've already touched or gone beyond that in 7 months. So the beauty of these OTPs, and I think again, in a way, don't get me wrong and don't take me in a wrong way, but there are positives, major positives which have come out of COVID. had COVID not affected us, we would not even have thought of this, because anyways we were doing a huge conference with the government of Tamil Nadu, a national conference. In fact, it was a regional conference where Southeast Asian countries were also involved on industrial safety. We were planning that in I think April 2020, which now is been by postponed by a year to May June 2020, and we are planning a huge conference on industrial safety and industrial disaster management in Vizag, Andhra Pradesh. And the Prime Minister's office has actually, on behalf of CIDM, has written to the state government of Andhra Pradesh to consider these CIDM concept and initiative in their state somewhere around February or March, once the situation gets better. So that is the sort of recognition we've got. In fact, I would, Dr. Pandey and Dr. Mittal and all the audience which is present with us today, FICCI is the only private sector organization in the entire country which has been made a core group member of the committee formed by NDMA, National Disaster Management Authority, for revising the national guidelines on chemical disasters. So the chemical disaster guidelines, which will be revised by March 2021, other than all line ministries, which includes 5 major ministries: environment, labor, chemical and petrochemicals, fertilizers, all these, Ministry of Home, and then IIT Kharagpur and IIT, other IIT, MNITs. FICCI is the only industrial body, private sector body. So I think this is because of the due recognition we've got for the work we've done in last decade or so in this area of CIDM. And I think, as I always say, and every time we meet, I say, we are this initiative is as good as the feedback we get from the participants and the numbers and the recognition or appreciation we get. So looking at the appreciation, I think I read a comment also which is pointed towards me. I think I've said enough, and that's why they're complimenting me so that I can keep quiet now. But thank you so much, Mr. Chandrasekhara. It means a lot to us. It means a lot to this very initiative what we have taken. And I would also like to, please excuse me, all the ladies and gentlemen whose question I could not take. But there were certain overlapping questions. Dipil Vasu also, I think, apparently is from the IT company, and he asked questions which were similar to what Abdul also asked. So I think we've had a very fruitful, very engaging, very interactive session, and we continue to, we will continue to do this. We'll continue to, operate on this model as long as we know that we are of any value to the professionals in the industry, to students in the academic institutions, to professionals, young professionals who are budding entrepreneurs or budding professionals for the industry, who are preparing themselves to be a part of this ecosystem. And we will continue getting the best of the speakers. That is something we don't have to call out for. All the speakers, all the experts, eminent experts we have, they are part of our family gang. I should say, we are a gang now, and they're always there to support and provide their knowledge and best practices to everyone who becomes a part of this. And why we are streaming it on YouTube, even if you could not be a part of these 3 days. These are now times are normalizing. People have their professional commitments also, but they can always go back to YouTube and check out the session live, and the presentations and everything. Every video, every bit is available there. So on that note, I would like to thank formally again Dr. Sunil Pandey, Director Terry. Thank you so much, Dr. Sam. Dr. Ashish Mittal, thank you so much for all your inputs and your expert advice and knowledge sharing with our participants and with us as well. Special thank you to my colleagues Akhil Gupta, Sanjeev Kumar, Menak Majumdar, Varun Sharma, Harshit from NIDM, Dr. Anjali, and it would be improper for me to end without thanking Dr. Anil Gupta from NIDM. He's been a key source behind these OTPs. Had it not been him, I don't think we would have been into our fourth OTP. The leadership from Major M.K. Bindal, the ED, Executive Director of NIDM. I think he's been his leadership is unparalleled, is seamless support to this partnership between FICCI, CIDM, and NIDM. Thank him. I would like to thank him again. And a special thanks to the CIDM board, chaired by General Bhardwaj, Mr. Labendu Mansingh, former secretary, Mr. Rajeshwar Rao, additional secretary in the Prime Minister's office, GIDM, Mr. P.K. Taneja from GIDM, ADPC, the Disaster Preparedness Center, all our partners, DPIIT, Ministry of Commerce and Industry, all these partners, NDMA. I think it's worth mentioning all of these names because we all are of the same on the same wavelength, on the same of the same mindset, and as they say, like-minded people have come together. And thank you also to COVID and the opportunities which it has extended to us. So on that note, thank you so much, ladies and gentlemen. Have a good evening. See you tomorrow at the same time. Use the same link and the same email ID to log in. Tomorrow at 2:30, we'll be online again with two very key presentations on safety management by Shri Upadhyay and Shri A.B. Lal from National Safety Council, followed by the validity session. We will have Dr. Muzaffar Ahmed, a former member National Disaster Management Authority, with us tomorrow, and also hopefully ED and IDM will join us. On that note, thank you so much. Bye-bye and take care. See you tomorrow.
Thanks, Rubab, and thanks for all the participants to be so patient.